In 2010, I visited the excavated Viking settlement at Lansaw Meadows in northern Newfoundland. Here I saw first-hand evidence of Viking settlement in the New World. There were the remains of longhouses and a forge for iron making. But the most enigmatic object found was a simple butternut. These are not native to Newfoundland. They are found further south. But just how far south had the Vikings gone? This question had captured my imagination. I learned about the Viking Sagas, detailed stories of the Viking voyages. For years, experts have studied these sagas and have made guesses as to where they had actually taken place. With the most up-to-date interpretation in hand, I plan to visit these places, one by one, to help put the Viking Sagas into context. One of these places was called Straumsfjord by the Vikings, but is today thought to be the Bay of Fundy. I've been to the Bay of Fundy before, but this time I want to see it in the raw, away from the touristy areas and the modern development. I want to see it the way the Vikings would have seen it. We pulled into St. John, New Brunswick for supplies. We headed into the city market. People are friendly here in St. John.
The city market in St. John is the oldest market in North America. And I have been in here, in this place, 23 years. I do good clean food. Everything here is made fresh from scratch. Wherever you're coming in from, please remember, come early and come hungry. Come old and come before hungry. Thank you.
We stocked the food in the fridge and headed out of town toward the wild coast. Soon the paved roads gave way to dirt roads, and the dirt roads got narrower and became trails. The fog began to roll in, which cut down on visibility, and it started to rain. Not only that, but the trails had narrowed, and were now just wide enough for a Land Rover. A wider vehicle would not have an easy time on these trails. We carried on down the trails until we reached our first obstacle, a river. I approached the stony riverbed and picked my way upstream. The Land Rover had dropped into an unseen hole and had gotten hung up on a rock. I needed to winch out. I unspooled the cable from my super winch Husky and hooked up to a tree on the riverbank. Slowly, I was pulled ashore. We continued down the trail. We were now traveling inland, deeper into the mossy pine forest, and further away from our destination on the coast. We made camp for the night in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. What would we find tomorrow? Would we make our way to the coast? As I sat by the fire, I thought of the Viking explorers and their ship, sailing down the coast, not quite knowing where they would end up. As with any worthwhile pursuit, there's always an element of uncertainty. And this trip is no different. The morning brought clear skies. I put water on for tea as my shoes dried on the hot stove. We broke camp and got an early start. When we gained any slight elevation, we could see the coast, but we were still unsure if the trails would lead us where we want to go. We would follow a trail slowly weaving between trees, only to have it end and have to back out and try again. Finally, we came to a washed-out trail with a slight downward trend. We followed this trail, and as the forest gave way, the glimmering Bay of Fundy was revealed. We had found a beautiful rock promontory jutting out into the bay. We made camp and indulged in the good food and wine we had brought from St. John. As the tide rolled in, my thoughts wandered. Maybe the Bay of Fundy is Straumsfjord, as mentioned in the sagas. Maybe a Viking longship once sailed past this very point we are camped now. It is likely that they found a better spot than this to unload their cargo and settle in for the long, harsh winter. But the sagas say they did winter somewhere on the coast of Straumsfjord. And where we stand now is just as it would have appeared to them, completely wild. The stories tell that they did not fare well that winter. Food grew short, and hunting and fishing was unsuccessful. They pleaded with the gods to send them something to eat, but to no avail. As darkness slowly closed in on the shore, my imagination grew stronger. The sagas describe one member of the party who had wandered off. He was found 3 days later at the edge of a cliff looking skyward. I can easily imagine him standing here at this very cliff, feeling the hopelessness of their situation. When the spring came, the weather improved and they hunted inland and gathered eggs on the shore. The humbled Viking explorers soon made their ship ready to continue their journey. As one man collected water to bring aboard the ship, he spoke this verse. With promises of fine drinks, the war trees wheedled, spurring me to journey to these scanty shores. War oak of the helmet god, I now wield but a bucket. No sweet wine do I sup, stooping at the spring. That night the moon shone brightly through the ghostly clouds. Its reflection was cast for miles across the still waters of the bay. Staring out from atop the cliffs, I felt like I had truly found Straumsfjord. The next morning was foggy. We broke camp and slowly headed inland.